Good morning, everybody. If you could please take a seat, we're about to start the first responders session. So first, I wanted to thank you for being here today. Not all topics are so easy, and so thank you for participating, for showing up, and for hearing the stories of the wonderful panelists we're about to have here on stage with us. The session will be divided into two parts. First, we'll start with a panel and then a fireside chat. I'll be your moderator today. My name is Kim Buisson. I actually am not from the humanitarian sector, so it's really an honor for me to be facilitating this conversation, but I imagine a lot of you are in that space. Can I see a show of hands if you work in humanitarian aid or in partnership with? Few people, yep, on the side. Hello, good morning. I am the CMO of Whooden Studios. Whooden Studios is a creative agency that is focused on telling stories about artists and organizations coming together to tell stories of impact. I also lead marketing efforts for Funding the Commons, which is an ecosystem focused on developing new models and mechanisms for funding public goods. And so that is related to this conversation. And outside of that, I work with artists, innovators, change makers to help them tell their stories and to help them inspire others to get involved and start doing the work that they do. So why are we here today talking about first response, and why is this conversation so key for changing the world now and being a part of this conference? The way that we respond to events can change the course of the impact of a certain event. So we know that difficult things happen, but research shows that depending on how the response is and how adequate the response is, the impact of the trauma on a family, a community, generations can vary greatly. And this is why conversations like this and efforts like the ones we'll hear about today are so important. So without further ado, let me introduce the first panelists that are going to join us on stage today. Three special guests, three incredibly resourceful women who work in very different structures. So we'll be able to hear about different innovation in the space and international and multisectoral examples that might inspire other kinds of efforts. So I'm going to introduce them first, and then they'll walk on when the jingle goes off. Our first panelist. We get an extra jingle. So if you want to come up, and I'll introduce you once you're seated, we'll flow with that. Thank you. Go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'll introduce first Marta, who's joining us today from Cameroon. She's very cold, she said. Not used to the Paris weather yet. Marta Agbornyenty is an award-winning midwife, a maternal child health advocate, and the founder and executive director for Mom and Baby Foundation. This is a foundation that helps pregnant women in crisis-stricken areas by providing community workshops and also distributing emergency kits to those in need. Just last year, Marta received a prestigious Global Goalkeeper Changemaker Award from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, nonetheless, acknowledging the magnitude of her impactful work. We have Elsa here to my left. Elsa joins us from Première Urgence International, and I think we have a few of you in the room, actually. Welcome. With over 200 projects in 25 countries, they offer support to victims of humanitarian crises. She has had the mindset of a first responder for most of her life, and we'll share a little bit about that today. And to my right, last but not least, I have Sophie Mower. She leads the strategic engagement and growth team at Humanitarian OpenStreetMap. She has spent the last 12 years in the humanitarian sector and the past 6 in international development, charities, and NGOs with a regional focus in Eastern and Southern Africa. OpenStreetMap, for those of you who don't know, is a free open geographic database updated and maintained by a community of volunteers via open collaboration, and we'll hear more about it today. So she's our technologically savvy participant. And she is passionate about this cross-section between people and technology and how technology can help provide new resources for us. So I'll stop speaking now and turn it over to our participants. I wanted to start with you, actually, Elsa. We had a great conversation together in our first call about the greatest challenges that are taking place today in the world of first response. Can you tell us a bit about that and how the landscape is shifting?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having us today. It's the first time for Première Urgence Internationale to attend such an event, so it's a great opportunity to witness. We are witness of what's happening on the field, and I will share with you some of those findings. I myself, I'm from a family who was torn by war. I was born in before the Bosnian War, and my family has survived this war. So I was very early on familiar with forced displacement, refugees, and how a war can impact people for generation, communities, but also individuals for years to come. What we are witnessing today as Première Urgence Internationale is that the world is facing huge challenges regarding climate change effects, and those challenges have intensifying the vulnerabilities and the needs of people who are in every area torn by conflict and war. So we are witnessing a superposition of layers into crisis, and we need to take into consideration that no crisis is just political or just climatic or just environmental, and that it's a combination of those factors that put people in what we call the red zone. As Première Urgence Internationale, we are trying to enable people to get out of this red zone, and we do it through the One Health concept. So if you want to know more about the One Health concept, we have a great game at the First Responder Corner. You can come and we can discuss afterwards. But it's the idea that a multifactorial crisis needs a comprehensive response. We cannot just target one of the issue. We need to have activities into the human health, animal health, environmental health, and the combination of those actions will make a better place for people. That's what we are doing in all of our intervention countries. We are witnessing that even in war-affected areas, we have several episodes of drought, of floods, and that people are multi-impacted by those crises. What I can say today is that, and I'm sure that a lot of people will share this thought, is no crisis is not political. Everything is about a political decision or political action or inaction. And we have the power to make a change, of course, individually or with our organizations, but we also call for action for people to invest in the response, in the humanitarian response, because we are witnessing a huge funding gap. The needs overall have doubled in the past 4 years since the 2020 COVID year, but the budget needed to respond is yet to be filled. So we call for action to invest in this response, and we call for action as well for political decisions to make a big impact. The situation that I was saying, that we have a superposition of layers, that we have crises that are both political and climatic. The best example that we are seeing today is that what's happening in Gaza. We have been working in Gaza for the past 20 years, and what we are witnessing today for the past few months is that we have constant bombing of population, of infrastructures, of water networks that are impacting the life of people, but also endangering the generation to come. The soils of the soils, sorry, and diversity. And we are obliged to witness, to testify that we cannot meet the unprecedented needs without a ceasefire, and we need a ceasefire to be able to access the Gaza Strip, to deliver aid, and to do it in a proper way to relieve the population. So that's what of my biggest message I wanted to share. We need political action to make things better. It will not be possible otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you for these many call to actions and for the courage to speak up today and use your time on stage in this way. I commend you for that. Like a big round of applause. Thank you. This is a nice segue, actually, into some of the work that Marta does, echoing this understanding of, yes, it is first response in the moment to a single crisis that is a multi-layered emergency, and yet it's multi-generational impact and one that goes on for longer than we can even estimate. When we were speaking, you were saying maybe 50 years sometimes. It's the impact on the soil, the biodiversity, the next generation. So Marta, tell us a little bit about the work that you do and how it does impact multi-generations, and why Mother and Children is how you got involved, and the role of midwives and all of that. You're the first award-winning midwife that I meet, so it's an honor.
Thank you so much. So first up, do we have mothers, fathers, grandmothers, or aspiring mothers in the hall?
Yay.
Great. So everything I'm going to say is going to completely resonate with you. So I equally come from, I'm the last of 7 daughters, so I'm like the baby of the house. And when I presented the idea of wanting to study midwifery, it was, everyone was against me. What are you looking for in this field? You're going to be underpaid, you're going to be a sit in the maternity room kind of woman. Is that the kind of life you want? And at that moment, you know, coming from a very disoriented educational background, it was a very big shotter for me. But deep inside me, there was something I knew, was calling out to me. So when I started studying midwifery, I got to discover that there was more I could do than just being a classroom student. I decided to volunteer with other organizations, local organizations in my community, and I started building this really close relationship with the women, and I got to know that there was more that these women face in the communities than we meet them at the maternity. Because the role or the whole idea people, or majority of people have for me about midwives is the fact that midwives just wait for the women to come in and they say, okay, open your legs, you have to push, I have to put my fingers in and make sure the baby comes out. But no, these women have needs right from the community, and that is the angle I was looking at. So I decided to embark on a journey of not just delivering babies, but on a journey of delivering change, because starting the For Mom and Baby Foundation back in 2021 didn't just happen in a day. I started by writing books this small because I realized during my second internship as a student midwife that women didn't know what pregnancy is all about. It will shock you to see that a woman comes before you with like an 8 months gone pregnancy, and she can't tell you what pregnancy is about, or can't tell you even one sign of labor. So those are the kind of challenges that we face, and with that, I decided to write this kind of books, give it out to them, and they decided having interest, because I don't know about in your various countries, but in my country, when you talk about a book, or once people see a book this big, everyone is scared, and no one will want to read it. So I felt like putting this information in really small and handy packages would make it really easy, and it worked. But yet again, I felt like that wasn't all I could do. Went ahead to create a blog, a Facebook blog, which is still existing, called Marty's Midwifery Diary, to put out like really informative, helpful content for mothers, their families, and babies, and that really worked too. But yet again, I felt like that wasn't all I could do, and then I went ahead to create the For Mom and Baby Foundation, which is why I'm seated here to talk to you. And this foundation has been really helpful, because I'm one person who believes in not just engaging in, or not waiting to have it all figured out, all clear before I engage or start doing it. I venture into it unclear. So once I start doing it, that's when I start putting the pieces together. And that was completely the case for us when we started in 2021. We launched the foundation with this emergency kit, which is a bag which contains like basic materials to be able to assist women to have a safe and effective delivery. So we give these kits out to them, and it helps them to be their own first responders before we even show up. Because, for example, labor isn't, labor is very spontaneous, and you can't be sure of your presence there when the woman starts, experiencing the labor signs. So we give them these emergency kits, which will help them, be able to, for example, when the mucus plug, that's like what holds the pregnancy in, kind of at the cervix, to put it in a simpler language, once it comes out, at that moment, the woman's system is very fragile. So most times women just get like towels, anything around, and just puts in their vagina, which is very, very uncomfortable and could easily infect them. But with our kids, they can easily get the maternity pad and put it in their, in their private pad, and, get really, really comfortable and, not get infected. So that's kind of like an introduction of what we do at For Mom and Baby Foundation. And so far, we've been able to distribute over 1,200 kits to women in these crisis-stricken areas, because my country is currently going through a socio-political crisis, and you find women living in bushes instead of the hospitals. And it's really, really horrific, because sometimes you find you go to some of these bushes and you see skeletons of like a woman and then a really little skeleton of like a baby close to her, where both of them had died and there was no one who knew about it. So those are the kind of realities we face. And yeah, there's equally a big funding gap, like she said, and we're getting there, and we're looking forward to helping more and more women. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. Maybe we take one big breath here. That was a big share. Thank you. There are a few things I heard in what you shared that will be an interesting segue into the work that Sophie does at OpenStreetMap. One, this idea of being your own self-responder and empowering women on the ground with information. I heard that piece. The other piece is you're towing the line between preventative and first response, because it is in two separate worlds. And I think we've talked about that with all of you pretty much in the preparation of this session, that there is a continuum between what needs to take place before, between crises, and then the first response. And there needs to be interesting feedback loops in between so that we can alter our response accordingly. So tell us a little bit, Sophie, about the work that you do with OpenStreetMap and how you're getting people on the ground involved as well as part of this feedback loop.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. So we've heard a lot over the last 3 days here at ChangeNOW about how those communities that are most affected by climate change are those communities that are living in developing countries in remote parts of the world, in flood-prone areas. But when you go onto the map and you search for those communities, it is quite literally blank. It's blank. These communities are not visible on the map. There is 1 billion people who are not visible on the map. And that means that when we work with first responders, those actors don't know where people are, how to get to them, whether or not they have access to basic services. And that makes it really difficult for us to be able to provide life-saving response techniques, activities, etc., to be able to save those people's lives and livelihoods. So, yeah, so it's a big project. Just a quick hands up, who's heard of OpenStreetMap before? Okay, cool. So OpenStreetMap is the Wikipedia of maps, so anyone can contribute to it at any time. But to be clear, I am not from OpenStreetMap. I am from Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team, or HOT, if you want to shorten it. And essentially, we were set up in 2010 in response to the Haiti earthquake. So first response is in our DNA. It's in our roots. It's where we started. But what we're kind of working on, and I'm hearing these, and you mentioned feedback loops, and it's the same with you guys as well. We're moving to a space where we need to be better prepared. We know that El Nino is coming. I'm based at the Eastern Southern Africa Open Mapping Hub in Nairobi, Kenya. And we know that there is going to be mass devastation as a result of El Nino. So we need to be prepared. So some of the things that we're doing as part of HOT is working with different types of communities, different groups of people, to see how they can better respond and integrate open data into their workflows so that we can make better decisions on where to take people. So let me give you an example. We're working on a project in Zimbabwe. We know that mass flooding is going to be coming. So what we're doing is working with a local NGO called Caritas. Caritas is an evacuation NGO. They want to know where to take people. So yeah, great. Okay, we've got a community of 300 people. Where do we take them when we know that their flood is coming? Okay, so we know that there's a church, a community center in this location. At the moment, it's not on the map, so we add it to the map. We also need to know, what is that building made out of? Is there a trench around it already? Is the structure of that building going to be able to hold our community of 300? Once we get that community of 300 there, after drawing buildings and roads onto satellite imagery and building out what we call the base map, we then need to know, okay, so what's the risk of taking these people here? What's the risk of increased gender-based violence if toilets are not segregated in the place that we're taking people? What if there's only one toilet, which means an increased prevalence of waterborne diseases? So this is the kind of data that really makes a difference to the decisions that local governments, NGOs, and community members themselves are making to be able to advocate for their own change, their own livelihoods and lives, and being able to make those decisions and have those positive feedback loops so that people aren't losing as much as they might do. So, yeah.
Thank you for that share and the concrete example of what you're doing. So we have a few minutes left for this conversation, and I love that you come from such different spheres, and yet we are hearing echoes of the same need for support, whether it's the allocation of resources, the involvement of stakeholders that can help fund those resources towards your efforts. What else have we not touched on today that you feel is really needed in order for you to be able to continue with these efforts and to have even greater impact?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question, and one of the things that I've really learned from being in this space today, over the last 3 days is about collaboration and partnerships and investment in young people and young enterprises and innovation. So the methodology for adding features to the map and then being able to use the map is that we mobilize our community of volunteers. In our most recent project, we are working on mobilizing 1 million volunteers to map that 1 billion people. So what we need to do is invest in those people who are adding to the map. But we're not just giving them the technical skills and the technical expertise, we also need to give people the opportunity to advocate for their own data, which is so important for people as individuals, for communities, for organizations. The next part of that workflow is that we then work with our teams of expertise to make kind of technical recommendations on what kinds of maps we're making. Once we've decided on whether on the different type of map it's going to be, we then train the organizations that we're working with on how to use that data. Because at the end of the day, a map's a map. It's the person behind the map that makes the decision, that can interpret that data and make a considered decision on how and where we can evacuate people, for example. So I think for me, like, my biggest learning is that we really need to invest in the people, as Brené Brown would say, and making sure that we're not just providing people with technical expertise to be able to do one specific thing, but providing them with a holistic approach, capacity building out that capacity in leadership, in advocacy, in understanding their own data, and then applying what they're learning from that data. So for me, it's about education and capacity building.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go next. So I really share the same idea with Sophie because I really think investment is one side we should really pay attention to or focus a lot on. And when I talk about investment, I'm talking about funding, and not just funding in terms of financial, but funding in terms of social and funding in terms of political. So when I talk about funding with respect to financial, I'm talking about please invest in us. You have your parents, your mothers, your fathers, your grandparents, and you know what goes on, in these stages of life. And particularly for me, I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm from Cameroon, and the maternal mortality rate there is at 438 deaths per 100,000 live births. And globally, once in every 2 minutes, a woman dies while giving life. And this happens approximately 800 times daily. So this is a huge call for concern. And I really believe that starting from, I never consider my work small because I believe that saving just one life cancels that woman from just being another statistic in a global stage as such. So we need to invest more to be able to save the lives of these women, to be able to save the lives of these babies. And that investment has to be done by, continuously carrying like seminars, workshops we carry out for midwives, because our work at For Mom and Baby Foundation is two-sided. On one side, we work with the mothers and the babies, and on the other side, we work with the midwives who are the primary caregivers to these women. So we really believe that touching all these sides will be able to make more impact. So yeah, I really buy the idea of investment. Please invest in us all because we do a lot on the field. Thank you.
Yeah, and I will add, please invest now, because we don't have time. Time is of the essence now. The climatic change is there. The effect, we are all witnessing it on the field. So we cannot wait for another COP or another political summit. We need action, we need investment, and we need it now. Change now. Right now.
And we'll end the panel on this. Just wanted to highlight two things that I took away from what I heard today. One, no amount of effort is too small. And yes, we need big investments, we need big support, but also everything counts. And then starting where you are, I feel like that's a common thread between all of your projects. Not necessarily knowing how big of an impact you can make, but having this intuition of this is the right thing to do, this makes sense, going forward and building on that. Because if we wait for everything to be hashed out, we will miss the timing as well. Yeah. So thank you. A big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. We'll just walk off this way. So we'll start our fireside chat in just a moment. It's the second part of this program. It's a bit more intimate of a conversation, so it's a different format. And we're going to have two very special guests with us today. Both of them are incredible humans whose organizations focus on bringing information and knowledge to global crises. So it's a continuation of a similar conversation. Each of them has shared stories with me that have deeply impacted how I understand what first response might be about. So I'm really excited to welcome them on stage. First, we'll have Philea Bartels from Refunite. She is the Chief Product Officer. Refunite, if you're not familiar with this organization, it's a nonprofit tech organization dedicated to reunited refugee families worldwide with their missing loved ones. But as you'll hear in a moment, it does a whole lot more than that as well. Jeremy Lachal is the Executive Director of Bibliothèque sans Frontières, Libraries Without Borders, and he'll join us too in a minute. It's an international nonprofit that provides tools, resources, and facilitators to strengthen the capacity of people in vulnerable situations by facilitating access to culture, education, and information. They are present in more than 50 countries, and they create innovative cultural and learning spaces that allow people affected by crisis and precarity to learn, to play, but also much more than that because it builds community centers for them. So please come on stage. Here and here. Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Change Now stage today. It was a pleasure meeting you both. You have so many stories to share with us. I did a brief introduction, but I'd love to hear from you about your specific projects. So maybe starting with you, Philea, to describe the kind of work that you do, concretely what it entails. I think as soon as I say tech, some people turn off. So tell us what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Kim. Yeah, we started with family tracing, as you said, but during COVID, we got called for a bigger mission because when we work with community off-grid, we face a lot of crisis in there. And during COVID, the agencies that put the branches in the remote areas, they are forced to close the branches. And these people in the remote area abandoned. And at that time, because I also work on the field, I even sleep with them to understand the struggles. But then during COVID, they call us, Philea, everyone who helped us leave us. What should we do? Is there anything you can do? I was like, well, my organization focused on family tracing, but I have network. I have network of partners. I have network of funders. Let me see what I can do. And it's my personal mission, actually. And then I called the funders and partners to, can we allocate? Can we allocate? This is crisis. Can we allocate some money to help them? And thankfully, there are people who's willing to do this. And since COVID, 3 years, we managed to save life almost 70,000 people and 100 projects to build their life from scratch in any sector, from building shelters, because they have also not COVID situation, they have natural disasters, they have tornadoes, they have flood, they have fire. So sometimes the house can be demolished in a night. And I have to help them. I feel like I have the capacity, like small, very limited capacity to help, and I have to do it. And why I'm here is because I cannot do it on my own. After 3 years helping 70,000 people I work with 25 community leaders, the leader from their group who coordinate about the projects. And I still have 135 million undetected off-grid citizens that Sophie just actually explained. The people who don't have IDs, people who live in a very remote area that don't have a chance for help. And these people are living in a village, only like 500 people, 1,000 people that don't easily known by the government. And these people also refugees, because I'm heavily working with refugees, and we're detecting when they move from one place to another, because their resettle can be almost every year. So we try to help them from building shelters, create a water system, because there are a lot of waterborne disease as well if you don't know how to process the water. And then it becomes a spiraling problem, okay? And then you get sick, and then where's the nearest hospital? The nearest hospital is like 500 kilometers away, and then you have to, take people there with what? If you're living in a desert and don't have any proper transportation. So the issue become more and bigger than what we imagine. And that's why we are here asking for help, because our organization is too limited to actually help that big amount of people living in the off-grid. And I personally try to put when it comes to funding, for example, okay, what I can fund. What we can fund is not just monetary. We do need monetary, we need money, but knowledge, is also the key. Because, for example, your house is got demolished by a tornado, let's say. And then I give you $1,000, but you have no idea on how to build a house. Then that money become a waste, right? So I'm happy to be here with Jeremy, who will provide education first to people to be able to sustain their life. So I think that's the key of to make people sustain. You give money and also you give education. So that's what we do. And I think one point that I want to add as well, that as a funder, either knowledge or monetary, you want to know where my money goes, right? And what I'm building is I provide fully transparency and traceability from your money to them and them back to you. Because I think that's the most important part. You want to know what they built, right? And what we deliver is we connect with WhatsApp. We built a chatbot for them to properly report every step of the way. For example, we want to help building shelter. Shelter can consist a lot of things, from the roof, from the window, from the wall, and it takes process, right, to build it, and it can be taken for a year. So we want them to send every single step to send it via WhatsApp, and it will display it publicly on our website, so you know when you fund what they do. So some of our funders actually feel like, I want to go there. Yeah, go ahead. And they were there. They were there. I think they visited some of the community gardens because they want to produce their own food. And after a year, they have like a huge garden, like a permaculture garden that they plant a few things, you know, not just like one, but a lot of things so they can sustain their own community. So you can see it live. And I think that's the key because, you know, as you know, there are a lot of like, oh, where my money goes, is the impact report is audited or edited. And for me, I don't want that because I personally put my money when I do a proof of concept, and I want to know where my money goes because I want it to benefit the right people. So that's a long story short, Kim. Not so short.
Not so short.
Yeah.
And thank you for the concrete examples, understanding that some of this even happens through WhatsApp, that it's so grassroots and so personal. You're hearing personal stories every day of how the monies are being allocated, what is being needed. Yeah. And I think something interesting about bringing you two together, the previous conversation had to do with informing preventative measures from the first response data. But having spoken to the two of you, I'm realizing the time scale of what actually takes place in the life of a refugee. I think the first time we spoke, and you mentioned the average person spends about 17 years in a refugee camp. That really struck me. And so I'd love to speak more about that. And you had even longer examples to share, but the time frame and why knowledge, information, education becomes such a pivotal aspect of first response. We would usually think of it maybe as coming later on, but it actually shouldn't.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for what you said. Maybe I want to start by sharing with you a story. In 2010, we were, actually before 2010, we were very active in Haiti. And in 2010, there was like this massive earthquake hitting Port-au-Prince, the capital of Haiti, and leaving like more than 1.5 million people in the streets, under tents, in camps. And our partners in the field, the Haitian organization, told us, please come with us, and we are going to create libraries under tents in the camps. And we were like, do you think in the priority everything has collapsed? And they said, yeah. You need to know something about Haiti, like culture and writers, novelists are very important in Haiti. And I think one of the earth of the Haitian resilience is also based on this cultural vibrance. But anyway, we went with them and we created some of these libraries, 25 libraries in camps, in the middle of the camps. And something very interesting happened. It became like kind of focal points, focal places in these camps, where people were coming, were leaving their children during the day because they were safe, were sharing information, and there was this big whiteboards where people could share verified information about food delivery, about jobs, about transportations, anything. And actually, humanitarian organization, because at that time we were not very active in the humanitarian field, and humanitarian organization came to us and told us, you know, you do something that we don't do. What we do, what humanitarian organizations traditionally do, is saving life, which is of course, the first urgency. But very quickly after, people need other things. People need to be human beings, after all. You know, you need to communicate, to educate your child, to project yourself in the future. What we observed at that time is that in the international guidelines of humanitarian action, there was nothing about access to information. There was so many things about education. So there are very precise guidelines about how many toilets you need in a camp for this kind of amounts of population. But nothing about schools, nothing about access to the internet, nothing about, you know, what we need today as human beings to live and to create links, bonds with other people, to project ourselves, etc. And from that experience, we launched a call to action called the Urgence of Reading, and it's still active. You can find it. And we went to the Secretary General of the United Nations with the petition, because we had 10 Nobel Prize saying for it, etc. And said, okay, we need to change the guidelines. And they told us, it took us 10 years to make access to water as an international human right. So access to information, it will take another 10 or 20 years. So let's try to create concrete actions. And that's how we decide to create this I would say device, but it's more like a device, called the Ideas Box, which is a media center in a kit that we created 10 years ago now with the designer Philip Stark. But this is another story. I wanted to share this story because most of the time, when we talk about education, culture, access to books, or access to the internet in a humanitarian crisis, people tell us, no, but it's not the priority. And of course, the priority is to save life, because people need to have their life saved to be a human being again. But I think today, and what we heard before in the previous panel, today what we are hearing, listening about this human-centered design, this focus on the community, is quite new in the humanitarian area. I think it came in the past decades. It came out about this idea of how we empower people rather than just helping them, rather them delivering food, how we support them, how we do a new trend is cash transfer, because when you got cash, you can decide what kind of food, for example, you're going to buy. And what we observe on our side, and the reason we created Libraries Without Borders 17 years ago, is that the 21st century is about knowledge. It's about actually most of the inequality that appears in the world are about knowledge asymmetry. My first course of economy was about information asymmetry, and the fact that when you buy something, you don't know exactly what is the margin of the guy who sells it that, and you have this kind of information asymmetry. But when it comes about knowledge, today, either you know or you don't know. Either you get access to quality education or not. Either you get access to the right information at the right level to decide what will be your training, what will be your next job, what will be about your health. Either you have access to the internet or not. You see how information and knowledge are at the heart of what makes us as human beings able to make qualitative and informed decisions. And it's particularly true in humanitarian response, where people don't have access to the internet, where people are in very vulnerable conditions. And in this kind of situation, one thing that psychiatrists and psychologists observe a lot is the lack of what we call agency. It's very hard to translate agency in French. Maybe we take the word élan vital, what I like. It's the ability to conduct a project from A to B at some point. And when you are like in this very vulnerable condition, it's very hard to project yourself. So what we try to do at Libraries Without Borders is to provide safe space and qualitative information, as we did like 2 years ago at the start of the war in Ukraine, for example. We were like 3 days after the start of the war, we are active in the border of Ukraine, in Poland and in Moldova, to welcome people. And just to give like a very, safe space for children. So the women were free to get some news from their husband who were like in Ukraine, but also to take decision about what will be the next move. And we observe that people in this kind of situation, they need this kind of safe space where they can be, okay, take their time, be human being, etc. But they also need that this very precise, acute information that will help them to take the good decision. So I think this crossroad between like spaces, information, and knowledge is really what community needs, because at the end of the day, and it's where we meet with Philea, at the end of the day, it's people themselves that will make the tools and will take the decision that will change their life. And what we can do from our, I would say, like Western perspective, is just like giving them the tools so they can make the decision and create themselves the response to the challenge they face. And it's the heart of the mission of Libraries Without Borders.
Thank you. There's something that I'm hearing, and you didn't say it explicitly just yet, but I'm seeing now that part of your roles is also to allow people to access leadership, and that leadership roles on the ground will make or break a community. And so from what I'm hearing, you also have this responsibility in your various endeavors to create a space where leadership can emerge. Yeah. Which is a really interesting aspect of this. I love what Martha said earlier about being your own first responder, and what you just said about not projecting our own understanding of what might need to happen in order for a community to rise up. So I just wanted to highlight that piece.
It's absolutely true, and I think Philea does something that is hyper important, is identifying the good leaders. It's not that easy. It's a very, very difficult job to do, and I think it's one of the big obstacle, I would say, like for first responder, is to identify the good people and good community leaders on which you will rely. And I think what you do is very important for that also.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, who am I, who we are to decide the fate of other people, right? So that's why I'm giving back the power for the community to decide what they want, what they need. And this leadership role is just to help them to get all the proposals from the community and put it in a voting system, and the majority will be the one who submitted to us. And we also help them. I think Jeremy put a good point of making a good decision, because when you're you just got a disaster, you lost your home in a night. Sometimes your mind is not there to decide what's the most priority for you. Last week, I just got a crisis report. And then, okay, what do you need? Okay, we need shelter, we need food, we need blanket, and I need table. I was like, wait, what? You need table? For what? I mean, you lost everything and you need table. I mean, food, I get it. And shelter, I get it. Blanket, I get it. But table? Yeah, because I need to eat on a table. Oh. Okay, when you're in shock, and then I get it, because then I try to remember when I'm in shock, I cannot just, decide things in a wiser way, let's put it that way. And that's why I always say to myself, give yourself a break to process the information so I can give a better decision. And that's why we try to help them as well to create a a better priority for them. I mean, not better priority, but help them to, do you really think that table is the most needed, you know? And we create a proposal together, Refunite, the leader, and the community. So when we submit it to the funders, to the partner, because when we search for the matching funders and partners, I need to know what they really need so I can find the right target, because not every partner and funders have the same understanding or values, right? So I need to be very careful on finding those people. And we have very limited time. Yeah. I think it's mentioned on the previous panel, we have very limited time and the crises are rising. I don't know how many times I have to, last week I get 4 crises that happen around Africa. One is fire, one is flood, one is tornado, and I think another one is flood as well. And I told them, okay, we gather a proposal and I need around a few hours just to, you know, like put myself in the right mind space as well, because it's too much as well for me to get all the information, and I cannot imagine them who have to experience this. So I think I cannot do it on my own and with our organization. I need everyone who can help us to be part of this. So that's why I'm here.
I would add to that when it comes to information or knowledge, what we observe at Libraries Without Borders, it's about 2 things, about access and accessibility. Yeah. It's, so the question of access is a big challenge in times of crisis, but for 50% of the world population today, even if they are not in crisis, they don't have access to quality internet. So with Libraries Without Borders, we'll work a lot on this question of what we call offline internet. So we have this kind of, I have one in my pocket, you see, this kind of nano servers. In this, you have like full Wikipedia, you have like tons of internet websites, you have 20,000 books. So it's this little box creates a Wi-Fi hotspot on which you will connect with your smartphone or with tablets, and the information and the knowledge is inside. But it's not only about that, it's also about accessibility. And it's about how you support people to be able to take this information and this knowledge and to make something with it. It's about learning to learn at the end of the day. It's about how it's not about only teaching people, it's about giving them the tools to manipulate the good information and create something with that. Yeah. And what I observe when I go to the field in some of our projects is not about only about how people will use, for example, this ideas box, this media center in a kit that we created. It's not only how they will like get access to the tablets, the books, or etc., but how they will create something. I can share with you like a very short story. When we in 2017, we created big programs with the Colombian government after the peace treaty with the FARC. You know, there was like this war with the FARC during 30 years, and the government want to be back in these villages where the states was absent. And we create libraries for peace with them. And in these libraries, there were like lots of tools for creativity for the populations, and there were like video cameras. And I met with a group of youngsters who were like learning to use the camera, and I asked them, what do you want to use them for? And the young guy responds to me, we are going to interview the FARC because we want to understand why we were fighting for so many years. And you see, like, it's also about how you create sense. It's not only knowledge, it's about the sense. And that's why we talk about culture, because at the end of the day, what relies us, what creates bonds between us is this, this cultural vibrance, this how we create meanings about all that.
Thank you. I think we'll end on this note. We're out of time today, but I love this last piece that you shared very, very much about creating meaning. When I first opened the session, mentioning how first response affects how trauma will land in the bodies, in the minds, in the communities, and being able to create meaning and connections, which all of your organizations do on some level, does mitigate that. So thank you for everyone who shared today, for your courage in asking for what you need, for your courage in sharing concrete examples that aren't always easy to speak to. And thank you to the audience for remaining with us and for tuning in to the conversation. Thank you. Thank you.